Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the writer's room. We changed it. It's been the writing stream, but it's now the writer's room. But the show we've been doing for a while here, and Ishii is heading us up here as our host, so I will turn it right over to him.
Well, thank you very much. I'm here with Kat Rocha, editor extraordinaire.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are going to be talking about writing good dialogue. Now, this was a request from Muhammad, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
So let's tackle the nuts and bolts of how to write good dialogue in both comics and fiction. There are similarities, but there are also some very big differences between the two. And definitely all of you out there listening, ask questions, ask away. This is your chance to pick our brains on the subject. And we'll try our best to answer your questions. So I would say just right out of the gate, the number one biggest amateur mistake of new writers is I'm writing how real people talk. That cliche.
Mm-hmm.
That is a massive, massive mistake that so many people say, oh, well, I'm including all the ums and ers because that's really how people talk. And
I have to write in dialect so they'll know how he sounds.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it's kind of a long, rambling, boring read, but I'm writing how people really talk. It's like, no, don't do that. Nobody wants to read how people really talk. Your brain doesn't even want to hear that. That's why we edit out when we're listening to people talk. We kind of edit out all the ers and ums and pauses. We don't really pay much attention to that for a reason. I don't know if there would be any great examples of I'm writing like a real person, the way people really talk.
Usually an editor cuts out that crap so that it sounds good.
Well, that's the thing. It's like with a story itself, you don't want to hear how somebody really lived out their day. That's boring. That's reality. You can do that on your own. You're listening to a story or reading a story because you want to find something that's crafted and it's exciting or whatever. So the dialogue's the same thing.
Do we really want to see the entire sequence of Luke going to Tashi's station, getting power converters, paying the cashier, loading it up into the speeder and driving home?
But that's so real, man. That's real.
And the thing is a lot of what is it? Indie, slice of life falls prey to a lot of that.
Oh, horribly. Only usually those characters don't do much other than sit in a coffee shop and talk to their friends. But then you get the quote real dialogue of them talking to their friends.
Yeah. But the trick to good dialogue, I would say, is it needs to sound natural and spontaneous. So you're aiming for it to actually come across as sounding very natural, very spontaneous, very real. But in truth, it's a tightly mapped out exchange between characters that draws a reader through the scene. Quentin Tarantino is a master of this, where it seems like a spontaneous conversation about how to eat, what hamburgers are like in Europe, but it's not. So that's something that, it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of time, but really the only way to do it is to see how other people have done it, study how dialogue is played out in a scene or by good writers or things you like. And then you compare that to how you want your characters to talk, what you want to come across, and you start to really kind of understand the beat and the rhythm to laying out good dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got some comments here.
Well, how do you approach dialogue, Professor?
Well, I agree with everything Ishii's saying there. I would also say, though, I would caution people not to go in the opposite extreme, because one of the things I tell writers or students too is everything. You go out and listen to how people talk. So you do have to have an ear for how they speak, but then you also have to edit. Like Ishii was saying, you don't just want to put any old thing they say down. like for example, I've been editing a lot of manuscripts by people, different writers writing sort of fantasy, any kind of level of fantasy, epic fantasy or urban fantasy or whatever. And there's a tendency, because you're writing a fantastical world, you're writing a fantastical character. Why couldn't this character talk in a fantastical way? And you might have all the story logic for that in the world, but if the reader gets bored of it, then you failed. Because it doesn't matter what kind of grand story or grand character developments are on the next page. If the reader can't be, you can't hold the reader's interest to get there, then that's a problem. So I always do that in my own writing early on, especially writing, fantasy. I'd be void of any kind of contractions in dialogue or anything like that. And it was just starting to sound really like it was starting to get laborious, So there's a balance, but yeah, not to negate anything Ishi's just saying.
Owen Lister writes, "The way real people talk sucks." Oh yeah, kinda. Write dialogue to be entertaining, like Pulp Fiction. The whole movie is about a lot of people talking, but it's so entertaining. Well, actually, that brings me to my next point, which is not all dialogue sounds realistic. Specifically, this was something I had to pay very close attention to when writing Case File Arkham. Classic noir, detective noir, crime noir, the dialogue in those older films and those novels is incredibly stylized. The dialogue that Raymond Chandler wrote in his novels, nobody talked that way, but it was meant to sound cool and poetic and very entertaining. And when writing stylized dialogue, it can be a lot of fun. It can be great when it works, but you really have to avoid sounding cliche or forced. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
And I would say that first Arkham, that was the hardest part, was making sure that I rode that tightrope just right.
Yeah. So I would add to that screwball comedies too. They often had some really tight, fun dialogue as well.
Yeah. You got any examples or?
I'm thinking Bringing Up Baby right now. I can't think of any specific lines of it. I just remember being really impacted by the first time I saw that. Like, wow, I wish I could speak like that, but it didn't leave me behind. It kept me on my toes. It kept me engaged because the writing, the dialogue was so smart, and not to the point where it sounded unoriginal, but it just it kept me engaged, which was really cool.
Kat?
I've been trying to think of how to best quantify it from my perspective, because when I read dialogue, and it's definitely somebody trying to sound natural, they tend to put in either too much slang to the point where it's like you've never heard people talk like this before in your life, or just putting, darling or y'all instantly is supposed to say they're Southern. It's like, no, it does not. Or just trying to be way too clever with their dialogue, thinking that they're sounding natural and trying not to sound, trying to craft it to sound natural, which is good, but being way too clever with, again, slang or, hey, bro, what's up? Or worse, using cliches to convey a character too quickly so that it just doesn't work. For me, the biggest sin is sexism equals asshole. No, not necessarily. Don't immediately introduce your asshole of the story by making him an instant sexist and hitting on a girl. That's way too easy. It's way too quick.
You mean the stereotypical sexist guy dialogue that's written specifically to be a foil for your female hero?
Foil for the female hero, or the
hey babe, when are you free later? Can I have your phone number, hot stuff?
Or the asshole for your male protagonist to go up against. He's the asshole because he's hitting on the only female in the room way too obviously.
Or what if the villain flat out says, Thor's not a woman, feminism sucks? What about that kind of writing? Is that bad writing?
Yes, that is bad writing.
How bad a writing would you call that? I mean,
painful.
like if you rated them like earthquakes, it's a little tumbler, or, this is a 9.0, destroy the entire state. Terrible.
We're getting into science and physics here with me quantifying badness. I got to think about that.
Yeah, that was a pretty awful comic book.
But anyway, so those are the sins that I see with dialogue, or at least is trying to be, quote, realistic. Is a lot of beginning writers tend to use too much slang or be way too heavy-handed when having characters talk a certain way to try to convey an idea.
Mm-hmm.
I would think another one of the huge sins that we see constantly being committed in comics right now, and this is from A-list great writers to crappy dregs bottom of the barrel Mag Versaggio writers. They think they're clever, trying way too hard to show how clever they are in their writing, how hip and cool they are with their pop culture references and
referencing whatever is currently hip at the time, and in 6 months it's completely it dates it.
Yeah, it dates it. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, look, your writing really should not come across as a a 30-second joke in a Family Guy episode.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of my problem with Family Guy. After a while, it was, hey, you remember this?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That was the entire show. Hey, you remember this dumb commercial? Let's show Peter in it.
Yep.
Oh, no. David Deister says, don't forget Zoe Quinn. Oh, I didn't forget Zoe Quinn, but see, we're talking about writers here. Now, Mags may be terrible at it, but he is a writer. Mags can actually form sentences and almost assemble a narrative. Zoe Quinn hires other people to write her stuff, and even then, it's god-awful.
Yeah. One thing, and stop me if you wanted to go in a different direction with this or anything, but I found that, one way to kind of avoid some of these pitfalls is to really and truly know your character first and foremost, to the point that you know how that character speaks. I've read a lot of manuscripts or a lot of even published works where every single character in the entire story speaks in the same way. Uses the same vernacular, uses the same phrases, uses the same idioms and all of that. And it's one thing if they're similar in life experience or whatever, but and that's not to say either that you should go the opposite direction and end up with the 90s X-Men show, which was awesome, but every character spoke with a different extreme dialect or accent or something like that.
Own charm, though. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm just using an example, but yeah, knowing each of your characters and knowing what makes them different to the point where you can hear them speak in your head.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes that just takes some note taking or just spending some time with your characters and even writings that's not part of the manuscript just to get to know them.
I would agree. I would say one of the most frustrating things was at some point, Warren Ellis, who I really, really enjoyed a lot of his writing through the 90s and early 2000s, at some point, his characters all started having the same voice. And I'm not sure why that happened. Mm-hmm. If he just got frustrated with writing comics or he got bored with the characters he was given or what. But that was kind of after a while, there was, oh, this is the Warren Ellis character.
Yeah.
And that's something you really want to avoid. And as far as getting characters to speak uniquely, there are a couple ways to do that. One of the things I actually spend a lot of time on specifically learning lingo and how sentences are arranged, and why different people would talk the way they do. For instance, when I was writing a British character, I spent a lot of time watching British television and jotting down sentences and seeing where words would be placed that would be different than the way Americans would do it.
Well, that you spent time actually learning the dialect of the particular area that
Oh,
character
yeah.
was, because that area had its own slang.
Yeah, Yorkshire,
Yeah.
which, in itself is a very unique accent.
Mhm.
And, the culture itself informed that. So once understanding a little bit about Yorkshire, you kind of understand where that style of speech came from and how they view themselves as a community was a big deal.
Mhm.
And so when writing characters, it's really good to find examples of people who speak a certain way and really just break down how they form their sentences. Literally write them down, study them, and say, well, I would have said it this way. Why did they say it that way?
Mhm.
And I would have like a book of notes with just sentences that stuck out to me. And I would go through and say, okay, these are repeated vocal patterns that these cultures use. And I'd keep that in mind. Great way to find that is YouTube and just looking up people's blogs and people talking about their lives or what concerns them. And it doesn't really matter what they're saying. You're listening to how they're saying it.
Mhm. How did people write before the internet?
You traveled, you went around.
Had to go out of their house, go to a library, some nonsense like that.
Well,
What's that? Is that like a wiki?
For Utopiates, I did a police ride along.
Oh, really? Wow, cool.
Yeah, just to get a sense of what a typical day for a police officer was and what they had to encounter. And
Awesome.
they're little. It took lots of notes about how they interacted with each other and the words they used.
Mhm.
And when I was writing Titanium Rain, I did a lot of YouTube viewing, but I also read a lot of autobiographies by pilots and soldiers, and I went to air shows and I listened to pilots talk, and just paid attention to how they interacted. And that's when I started to realize that fighter pilots had an almost college dorm in the 90s subculture among themselves. Hyper competitive, but very juvenile.
Uh-huh.
But highly intelligent. And then you'd see at the Marines, they were like just royal badasses. They were like Spartans interacting with each other. It was totally different cultures.
It's called a cockpit for a reason, honey. Sorry.
No pilot would say that. If you learned, no. I met plenty of female fighter pilots. And let me tell you, if you earned your place in that boys' club, you earned your place.
Mhm.
But if you didn't, no, they wouldn't even bother with that insult. They wouldn't even bother because, they're depending on you. Their lives depend on their wingman. And if someone's been quota hired, that's everybody's life on the line. And sadly, what was it? The Thunderbirds quota hired their first CAG being a female, and that lasted 2 weeks when somebody died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no one's going to make that insult.
Mm-hmm.
And, I watched a documentary on, was it the Enterprise carrier?
Yeah.
Carrier group?
Was it the Enterprise or was it the Nimitz?
I think it was the Nimitz, yeah. And interestingly enough, one of the pilots that was featured actually went to the same dentist's office we did, which was weird. But you watched the pilots interact, and the two women, no, it was a boys' club, and they were one of the boys. It was not like that at all. They had earned their place.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that movie, Jesus. But that brings me to my next point. Lingo is very important, and not in the way that most people think. You don't, when you think lingo, often you think of like Scotty on Star Trek or Geordi, where they're just throwing in science bullshit.
Magoing.
Yeah, science bullshit, science crap between words.
Yeah.
You look at the something science converter and the warp thrust drive. We're going to science.
Reverse the polarity of the neutron flow.
Science bullshit, science.
Yeah.
No. Lingo, what people really need to take into account is all subcultures, all professions, all religions have their own set of lexicon and terms and shorthand when talking among themselves. And you need to learn what they are when you're writing those characters. It's the stuff that they would unintentionally say. again, getting back to the subculture of fighter pilots, and it was a lot of fun studying fighter pilots, was, just the ridiculous things they would say, their own lingo, like, before they would take off for a long mission, they would all have to take a combat dump. Now, in actual terms, that means dropping all excess weight from the plane before you go into combat, because you don't want to slow the jet down. But when the pilot took a combat dump, that was hitting the can. Or the fact that there was a the ramp crew, they all use hand signals often because it's so loud. And one of it is lift the chocks, meaning lift the blocks under the wheels so the plane can leave. Apparently at bars, when everyone's really, really drunk, the ramp crew will often, one of them will signal the lift the chocks, meaning, okay, let's all leave, we're too drunk. And it's things like that that really brings an air of authenticity, but it also gives you a sense of what their lives are like and how it informs them as people. And if you're writing a fictional setting, you need to create these little rituals and these shorthand terms and this whole this lexicon for their subculture. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I think we've got a super chat.
Yeah, AJ Boomer, thanks for the $5. He says, how much dialogue is too much? One of my issues with modern television series is that they're too dialogue driven. It feels like padded storytelling.
Oh God, I think that's a symptom of I'm so clever.
Yeah.
You that is one that really drives you nuts.
Oh, it is, but do you want to go first, Professor?
No, let's hear from you first, and I'll tack on anything I have.
Okay. Definitely that comes off as I'm so clever. I'm going to have, this is the moment where my character is going to say all the witty things. One of the, I may get some enemies by saying this. No, the new Doctor Who. Okay, I am a huge fan of Doctor Who. I grew
real
up with
Doctor Who.
Yeah, real Doctor Who, up all the way through McCoy and McGann. Yeah, Peter Davidson was my favorite. Yes, I know Tom Baker is awesome, but Peter Davidson's my doctor. Starting with Tennant and moving forward, the dialogue seemed to be nothing but the doctor is so clever and he knows all the things and he is smarter than all of you. And
the writer is so pleased with himself.
Yes, and that is definitely one of the biggest examples that I can think of at the moment of too much dialogue. I would say one of the best ways of being able to tell if you're writing too much, because I also know that it's something that new writers will do who don't know when to stop, and that's natural. Ask yourself, is what my character is saying better conveyed through action? If you can show rather than have your characters talk about it, do that instead.
Yeah.
And kill redundancies.
Yeah.
Redundant dialogue, just nix it. Don't waste your reader's time. Seriously.
Yeah. If your character has a phone conversation about the big football game, they shouldn't immediately get off the phone and start talking about, I was just talking to so-and-so. We're going to the big game. Oh, is that at this time? Yeah, it's this. It's like, you just got through all that.
Yeah. I like what you said there too about how, show it if you can. Sometimes their dialogue is a great opportunity to tell some things that you shouldn't have taken the time to show. It would have slowed the pace or something like that. But people really abuse that, and I agree with what you're saying. Agent Boomer asked about television shows, so you can really take this through towards comic writing. This is a visual, partly a visual medium. It's nobody wants to see two characters having a conversation, just sitting at a table and just having a conversation. On a television show, again, a comic book, you can't do that for very long. That's why if you watch a lot of these dramas where they've got a lot of exposition and whatnot to get through in speech, they're always walking down a hall. They're bustling through the court, or they're walking down the hospital hallway or something. You know?
Okay, let's be honest, Professor. If you've got a long talky scene that was in the book and it's got to be there, add titties. That's the HBO rule. Remember?
That is the HBO rule.
Okay. This is a long talky scene with lots of information that the people paying attention need to know. But let's face it, at least a half the audience are morons. Show them titties.
Actually, I'm reminded of watching. I think it was Doomcock going over Star Trek STD.
Oh,
and,
God.
They would have these long, drawn out, talky scenes that, quite frankly, could have been cut 100%, and it wouldn't have hurt the quote story at all. But what they did was they had the female characters jogging while doing it, and the camera was just focused like square on their chests while they were running. So that's really the whole point of the scene.
Wow. Yeah. You know, it does make a good point though. Setting and I forget what you can freshen things up by setting and what the characters are doing during dialogue. Now that's not going to help it if it's bad dialogue, it's bad dialogue no matter what they're doing. But excuse me. I remember there's a screenwriting book I have, and it talks about that ubiquitous cliche scene at the beginning of a movie where you got like some men in a boardroom around a table, and that's where your exposition dump is or whatever. And he referenced some movie, I forget what movie it was, but instead of a boardroom, it was some like the boys club there, getting in a sauna and like draping their towels over. You know, it was just like, it was awkward, it was weird, but it kept the readers a little more, you know, in line. I still prefer Ishii's titties idea to that, but you know,
hey, it works.
The setting is
it keeps you engaged and entertained. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Having, if it's a visual medium, having your characters doing something while they are talking is definitely a good thing, because just like in comics, having 9 panels of talking heads, you know, floating in space is boring.
You can get away with 1 page of that. That's okay. You can get away with 1 page of that. But after that, you better do something else. I'm
trying to remember what it was. Actually, I think it was, sadly, Watchmen. You get these scenes,
there was a lot of really slow scenes in Watchmen.
Of just essays written in speech bubbles. And
that's because Alan Moore had to show us how smart he was.
Word to writers, we all know you're smart. You don't need to show it off that badly.
Well, the bit about long scenes of dialogue was a challenge for me with Case File Arkham, because a large part of noir and detective fiction is the detective detecting, going around, talking to people, piecing together.
Actually, that's a wonderful example. I've got a better one for you. The poker scene for Titanium Rain.
You want to lay that out?
In Ishii's book, Titanium Rain, the fighter pilots, this was the book he was studying fighter pilots for, are sitting around having a poker game. And it's, at its core, it's a scene of people talking about the state of the world and giving the audience information about what the conflict is about, why they're at war, who it is they're fighting, how close they are to the conflict, and who the allies are and who the enemies are. And
defining the personalities of the characters at the same time.
Yeah, all of that in one scene of just these pilots talking. But that's boring, as the professor said. Just people sitting and talking, especially about something that sounds infinitely more interesting, the war that's happening out there, and we're not out there. We're in a room looking at people sitting at a table. Mm-hmm. How do you make that interesting? And so Ishii set up this scenario where the poker game that they were playing comes to represent the conflict, and they full on say, okay, you're this country, you're that country, you're that country. And they use the cards and playing the game as a metaphor for what the stakes are.
And the reason that I did that was the war story. I really wanted more to focus on the characters and their experience as pilots. I didn't really want to get too bogged down with geopolitics, but it needed to be laid out. And so another thing that I keep in mind, and this is not quite dialogue related, but when writing comics, you don't have a lot of time and a lot of space to work in. It's not like novels where you can take your time. You can
within reason.
Within reason, yeah. You have to be tight. You've got to be efficient with everything you do in comics. Mm-hmm. So whenever I wrote something, I tried to make every scene function on multiple levels and convey multiple plot points or multiple things at once, be it world building, character development, or furthering the plot along. Mm-hmm. And so that poker game was one prime example. I needed to figure out a way to quickly and smoothly lay out what the conflict was and why. Or actually, I didn't even get why, just what the conflict was, who was involved, and who are our main characters and what are they like. Mm-hmm. And that took the form of a group of fighter pilots on Alert 5, which is when a bunch of pilots are essentially in a little shack on the runway and they can be called out and in the air and off to a fight within 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So they're all in full gear and they're just kind of sitting around waiting and playing cards and bullshitting.
So there's an example of a scene that could have been way too much dialogue, could have been very boring, but instead was actually very engaging. In fact, a lot of people had commented on how that was their favorite scene, with how engaging that was.
And when we did the audio drama version, which was fun, was even then when I was writing it, I felt that in the audio version, it did seem to go a little too long. So I intercut it with scenes of a ground war that the pilots have to go fly out and help the soldiers eventually.
Oh, nice.
And I think that if I ever got to do Titanium Rain again, which I may in novel form, I'll do that.
Actually, that brings me to a question for both of you. And we've touched upon this already. Adapting like the dialogue from a book to a TV show, like George Martin's Game of Thrones, or transferring it from one to another. Should you stay 100% true? How should you adapt it? What are both of your thoughts on that?
Okay, before I do that, I have to get to Hay Strings. I would absolutely buy Titanium Rain, but can't find the graphic novel anywhere. I'm sorry, Hay Strings. The book is out of print. I would love to bring it back, but I was never quite happy with the art. I'd always wished to do it again, but never found an artist that was up to the task. And that's not an insult to artists in any way possible. It was a very high-end book, and the kind of artist I needed, I couldn't afford. I mean, we needed someone who could do, what would you say? Ghost in the Shell style art?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it was just, I could not locate an artist within my budget to do that. So I'll probably finish it as a novel. Mm-hmm. Although if you go to the 01 Publishing website, you can order the audio drama, which I'm very proud of.
Cool. Excellent.
But as far as comics, the big thing to understand about writing dialogue in comics that is different from any other medium is you've got that page. And you've got that page real estate, and you've got to share it with the art. And so you have got to be as efficient as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. You cannot waste time with Tom King random bullshit filler dialogue.
Yeah.
Or disembodied heads in the void.
Right. Mm-hmm. Every line you put in there needs to be there for a reason. You can't just have throwaway words.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the nature of the medium. And I love that question Kat had about the adaptation. And you've been talking about adaptation too here, Ishi. And that's one of the things that I've been doing with everything. Actually, all the comic stuff I'm doing right now, I had to be adapted from a prose, either prose short stories or the next campaign I'm working on to adapt from a novel that I'd written. So you lose because you just can't. And please, don't, if you have this temptation to do it, you do not copy and paste the whole, chunk of narrative over just straight into a narrative box, caption box or whatever. That's, it's far too much dialogue. I'm somebody who reads a lot. I read a lot of prose novels and everything, but if I still look at a comic book page and there are too many panels and too much dialogue, that's unbalanced for that medium. And it's not, so you do have to ease up on the number of panels, ease up on the amount of dialogue. And so, yeah, I've noticed, like, okay, for the Fire and Winter story, I'm thinking of, for example, that the short story opens with a little bit of interiority of Ren when she's coming home from college to, her mother's about to die. Her grandmother's, sick on her deathbed there. So she's coming home from college to spend some time with her there. And she had some interiority I was able to do, sort of stream of consciousness, to opening up the story. But you can't do that in a comic. So I had to fully rely on the dialogue between her and the old lady who was driving her there, and then her sister Winter when she met her. And, you do have to think adaptation is actually a really good exercise. If anybody struggles with dialogue or wants to get better with it, try to adapt something that fully relies on dialogue, and you really will have to pull out all the stops and knuckle down and do it well.
I would say the other thing to keep in mind when adapting is that the visual medium flows differently than prose.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a lot of self-reflection in prose and a lot of not flashbacks where you're flashing back and giving all sorts of back information in the middle of a conversation that you just can't throw into a comic or even a TV show without it just interrupting the pacing.
Yeah.
And that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing is if I ever actually do get around to converting any of my comics into novels, I would probably arrange the scene orders slightly different. I would arrange the scenes somewhat different because there are different details I could communicate in prose rather than visually. There are certain things that play out visually better. Things like that.
Yeah.
I have another question for the two of you.
No.
Oh,
wait a minute. I'm sorry.
I think that it goes hand in hand with dialogue and what you were just talking about with, things that you can put in one medium a certain way, but, in another medium, you may have to leave it on the cutting room floor, as it were, but, maybe you can convey the same idea in a different way. How do the two of you approach inner monologue or inner thoughts? Because those can have the same sins, as it were, being too clever, too witty, front loading too much, giving too much information. How do the two of you approach that?
In comics or prose?
Both.
Who wants to go first?
You go for it.
Okay, well, I guess that's a fair question to me, considering so much of my writing has almost a confessional feel to it, where so much of it starts with the character just saying, I am this, I have gone through that, this is my birth. There's often this tone of them just letting it all out to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And when I write in third person, not so much, but a lot of my first person writing has almost this confessional tone to it. And I would say in prose, really the most important thing is to have it resonate and read real and have the reader nodding their head and saying, okay, I understand, or why the hell did you do this? Or really feel like you were talking to them. Or that they're almost reading if it's a story being told in first person, presumably in some weird way you are imagining this person telling you what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get that feeling like that person is speaking directly to you, that is how I would approach it.
Yeah.
For comics, there is a similar tone. I mean, you've got to keep it reading real. You've got to have that same vibe, although it's more like you're looking over the person's shoulder rather than them talking to you. And maybe that's because it's visual.
Mhm.
But the most important part there is anytime the art communicates it, and it's also in the inner monologue, you kill that inner monologue, get it off the page.
Yeah. For me, for prose, I tried to do as little internal monologue as possible. I'd rather rely on free indirect discourse, where it's just that third person narration is so attached to the single character that it can seem like I'm just describing what's happening in the room, but you're describing it so closely in their voice that it's clear that this is them perceiving it, so it's kind of it's a little fresher than just then he thought blah 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 blah. So it's yeah, I'm trying to think of an example. I'll try and find one up in a second, but and in terms of comics, I really don't use. I have yet to use. Now I haven't written nearly as many comics as Ishii has here. I'm just just really breaking into the comic thing. So I've yet to use internal monologues in a comics. I know that they're done. Like Batman, he's as a detective, so you would quite often have the hardboiled detective narrating his case to you. So it's not a problem because you can see Batman do all of this action around Gotham while he's thinking these thoughts to himself. Or Spider-Man, thinking about how woe is him, how horrible he's got it, as he's swinging through New York or whatever, because you've got all that action while it's being given too. So, yeah, I defer to Ishii on the comics part of it there.
Well, I would actually probably attribute the inner monologue in my comics coming from two places. And the one is that it was me trying to find a happy medium between the literary prose fashion of writing things, being able to still get that onto the page, and also just being very introverted. And I feel like in a lot of ways I'm not really connected to my surroundings, and I'm watching it and musing about it. And so I think it's just a kind of a side effect of moving through life that way, that's how it ends up on the page.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few other notes. I took a bunch of notes to cover, and there's another Kat brought up that is not related to what we've been talking about. Well, there are two, actually. There are two traps that she hates. The first is the "as you know, Bob" trap.
Yeah, that's horrible.
I hate it with a passion. I really do.
Yep.
So how do the two of you avoid that trap with your exposition, especially when it's, people having to do dialogue? Like I think, Professor, you mentioned the boardroom scenes or things like that. How do the two of you avoid as you know scenarios?
Well, there's one thing to bring up before we get into that, in that comics has a twin to as you know. Because as you know is a verbal trap, but there's also a verbal visual trap as well, which is, hey, look, it's that, and it's right in front of them. Look, it's Superman. No shit, asshole. That car blew up. That's the visual as you know. How do I avoid it? By writing good dialogue.
Really?
I would say that it's kind of a implied sort of thing, is that instead the dialogue starts implying these things, or it starts coming across in different ways. I would say the most recent one, let me try and pull it up while I'll have the professor answer, and then I'll try and pull this up for you, okay?
Okay. I was just trying to pull up something myself here. But no, so the problem with the as you know thing is that the writer needs to get some information across to the reader, some exposition that these characters already know. So the writer thinks, well, let's have the characters talk about it, right? Using dialogue. Well, the problem is that you'd never say that. That it's not natural to for two people to say, well, as you know, blah blah blah, things that you already know, things that I know that you already know, that I know you already know. That's just not natural. So what can you do? What kind of scenario can you bring about that it would be natural for some of those things to come back up and be rehashed, So think about, and I'm going to give you the my go-to anyway, and there are other answers too. But what is the one context or scenario that makes people want to rehash things? An argument, a fight, a conflict of any sort. Everybody brings up the old wounds and everybody wants to go over all the things again and again or whatever. So that's one of the things I did for that story of Fire and Winter that illustrator Monk was illustrating in my book. Like I said, I had to translate a lot of the interior monologue, a lot of the her interiority anyway, going home, and that was giving the information about how people had always shunned her grandmother, thought she was some witch in this old country town, and stuff like that. And she was coming home, she had been the one to get away and go to college, but Winter, her sister, stayed behind to take care of her grandmother, and there was some conflict between her and her sister because of that and all that stuff. So how do you get that across? Well, I had Ren have a little argument with Miss Susan, who's dropping her off at the house, and then I had Ren get into it with Winter a bit when they meet, because people love to rehash that kind of stuff, and that's very natural. It's not, as so unless it's very passive aggressive, in which case that works too.
Okay, so I'm going to read a scene from something I'm currently working on, and just to set the scene, it's a cyberpunk setting. We've got a 16-year-old boy who's wandered into a red light district. So just keep that in mind, and I will try to read it, and hopefully it'll sound good. "What's your weakness, sweetie?" chirped the cigarette girl. She dipped out of the crowd and sauntered up to Jack. Aside from the box tray slung around her neck, the girl was completely nude. Her modified skin shimmered like a jellyfish. "Got smokes, got drops, got crystals, got candies, got anything you want." She wiggled her hips and made all the items in the tray jiggle. "Nah, I'm good," Jack said, trying his best to look bored. He fought the urge to check out her tits. Instead, he leveled his gaze on the holographic text that danced across the front of her tray. "Anything you want, anything you want, anything you want," sparkled in bright red letters. "Ah." Her shoulders sunk as she pouted her painted lips in an exaggerated display of defeat. "Don't be like that. It ain't a trip to Toyland if you ain't got any toys. I hear that's not why they call it Toyland." As if a switch had been flipped, the cigarette girl perked back up. "Yeah, a long time ago, people would come here to screw electric dolls. A practice of that." She blinked proudly and stiffened her posture and raised a single finger in the air. "Barely a generation ago was the norm, but has since been abandoned. Referred to as companions or love dolls, depending on their purpose, these biomechanical sex appliances were once highly sought after. Under what Toyland gets its name from? Did you know?" The girl gestured wildly as she rattled off her spiel, her bare breast swaying and bouncing as she did. She thrusted out her chest dramatically and announced, "These dolls looked and felt almost absolutely real." That's when Jack gave up and ogled her goods. In fact, back in the day, it said these love dolls would service as many as 168 clients per week. Wow, that's a whole lot of sex. And that's... She winked at Jack and did a little curtsy, signifying the presentation was at an end. "The part where I forget how the rest goes. They give us a history lesson as part of the job. We're supposed to memorize it." "Yeah, but is it true?" "That's what they tell me," she shrugged. "But maybe I don't want to believe. No more. So anyway.
So there. He utilizes tits and also showing that she's giving information through a rehearsed spiel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this could have been an as you know, but it wasn't. It was this very conversational dialogue. But in the process of writing that, you got all sorts of information about this world. Just the fact that this girl is completely nude, mm-hmm. and her skin glows like a jellyfish. And she's got this box that is scrolling a message across it.
And it's filled with drugs.
Yeah, there you go. That tells you everything you need to know about this place, right?
Yep. Yeah.
The fact that the spiel is rehearsed and that she doesn't even remember all of it shows you how well managed it is and how much it's almost a Disneyland sort of playground.
I'd say maybe more Knott's Berry Farm.
Oh, jeez.
No, Disney, they'll fire you if you don't know your spiel.
And then on top of that, you've also got the teenage boy who's 16 years old and struggling with hormones. And you get that, he's not quite comfortable around girls.
Mm-hmm.
That's all explained without a single "as you know" or me saying, Jack was uncomfortable around girls, especially ones that were completely naked.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's engaging. The visuals, yeah, that's the way to do it. Definitely. You think about, you've only got a certain amount of page. Writers love, especially when you're writing genre. We love. I can't tell you how many writers want to come to me and just tell me they could sit for hours and tell me about their universe, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and see, this family over here is actually in a feud with this family over here, and that royal. That's wonderful. You have to have that. You have to know that. Doesn't mean shit to a reader unless you put it in a story. And if you can't get to where you can put it in a story, then no one wants to hear it.
Another thing that's in my story, I was going to read a little further, but I realized, you know what? This is not the pimping Josh Finney's pimping his fiction show.
Go for it.
But another thing that comes across in that scene later on is you find out that the two of them continue to talk, and you find out that both of their lives are not all that different after all, and that you start to realize how this world has almost a Dickensian apprenticing of young people, mm-hmm. and that their career choices aren't really theirs, and that their situations aren't all that different. And that's communicated again just from them talking.
Going a step back, as is well established, with prose, you have pretty much as much real estate as you want to have your dialogues, tell your story. It's really only dictated by the pacing of the plot. But in comics, since you do have that, you have to be frugal with your real estate, not only with your art, but also with your dialogue. Mm-hmm. There is some debate as to exactly how many words of dialogue you can have per page. And I'm not talking per panel or other things like that, because I do know that there are thoughts on that too. But let's just go big and just say, on average, per page, how much dialogue should you have so that you don't have wall of text?
I don't really have any kind of absolute number on that. And in fact, I defer to Ishii even asking him. I feel like, because Ishii's, lettering my stuff, I feel like I'm on the sparse side with that. And I make a conscious
side.
Okay, good. Because I make a conscious effort to do that, because I do want to respect the visual nature of the comic medium and let my artists do some storytelling in their own right. So much so that Ishii's had to tell me a couple times, you need some dialogue here. Like, oh yeah, okay, I get you right. Okay, yeah. So I don't really know an exact number, but I would say I always try to err on the sparser side of it.
Well, the one thing to keep in mind, sparse dialogue is good, but at the same time, words in a panel are going to draw the eye quicker. Mm-hmm. They're going to want to read that and see the art. So in a sense, the words often do pull the eye along to the next, even if it's just a little bit of speech.
Yeah.
There's a loose rule, which is 150 words a page in comics. I've broken that rule. I take it as a huge compliment that when you read my book, you said, well, there's a lot of dialogue, and typically I'd say there's too much, but it works. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
I would say as long as the reader doesn't get bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good rule. That's a very good rule.
So do we have any other questions? Because I'm kind of out of stuff, I think.
Let me see through the chat here if I missed anything. Muhammad had asked something a while back. See if I can find it. Muhammad said, how do you make sure that the language is free-flowing and natural but not obnoxious and try-hard? I can write Lord of the Rings like dialogue very well and pretty naturally, but modern dialogue is bad. Or his modern dialogue is bad, I think, or hard for him.
Well, maybe that's just where your muse is in this high fantasy setting. I mean, I've got the exact opposite problem. I can't for the life of me write fantasy dialogue. I can't even begin to imagine it.
Mhm.
I have a real hard time with that genre, in fact. So it could just be that's where your passion lies, is writing fantastical dialogue.
Mhm.
Really, it's just such an easy fallback. But what would you describe the dialogue of Star Wars? It's in a way timeless.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, at no point does Han get behind the Millennium Falcon and say, groovy.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Lego. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
as far as writing modern dialogue, really, yeah, I would say again, just study how people talk, and then it's kind of the juggling act of making it seem natural and spontaneous, but in fact, it isn't. It's well planned and well plotted and orchestrated.
Mhm. Lego Ferris Studios says, "How do you give plot dialogue without having it be forced and unnatural?" Well, I was kind of speaking to that, answering Kat's, avoiding the "as you know" question. Adding some conflict, adding reasons, valid reasons why these characters would have to say these things that you need the audience to know, even if they don't need to say them for themselves. So, like I was saying, people like to rehash things in an argument, or when they're triggered and bring old wounds up or whatever. That can be a natural reason to bring up some of that stuff and get it across to the reader.
Yeah.
You got it?
Well, no, go ahead.
Oh, I have another question for the two of you.
Oh, sure.
Okay. This just came to me. It's a sub thing of the "as you know," and that is, and I don't know if either of you have written this type of dialogue before, so this is also your preferences or how you would approach it if you haven't done it. And that is, we read a lot of superheroes, we have there are a lot of stories like this. How would you approach the villain giving his manifesto without it coming off as cheesy?
Well, you go first. This is your specialty.
No, I was going to say, all you have to do, this is what they do now. They'll hang a lantern on it, as they say, where the villain will say, "I'm usually not given into monologues, but I'll monologue this time because I'm feeling so good," or whatever, or something like that. I think you have to avoid that moment, because that whole moment's cliche when you've got Batman and Robin are tied up to the Penguin's contraption, and as he sits there and tells them what's going to happen and this and that. You just have to find other ways. I mean, if it's a visual medium like comic books, you've got other methods at hand besides a monologue. You can have them see things. You can have the villain speaking to this person or that person. You can show them making the plans. You can, there are other ways around it, I think.
The villain can have an inner monologue and doesn't tell anyone. It's him plotting and scheming and laughing behind his Dr. Doom mask at what he's going to do to everyone like a madman. Or alternately, you could just look at a few real dictators and see when they found the reason to lay out their master plan to large crowds of people in a stadium while having torches burning around him.
True.
I think it was Muhammad that said he wanted to write like Paul Dini. How do you do that? Well, you study Paul Dini, and I would go so far as to actually write down sentences of his that you like,
yeah,
and exchanges that you like, and study why they work.
Yep. You got to read. You don't want to stay in that place, but to some degree, you have to read what you want to become, and you start to become that. Now, you can't stay there. You just become Paul Dini light. You got to become you eventually. But yeah, I mean, you start by learning and studying like that. Yeah.
And keep in mind, there's a rhythm to dialogue, and that is the other thing that you've got to pay attention to, because if that isn't there, that's when it starts to come across as a textbook.
Yeah.
Talk more about that.
Talk more about that?
Well, you said there's a rhythm to dialogue. What do you mean?
Well, You said there's a rhythm to dialogue. Pause. What did you mean? That's a rhythm right there.
Literal cadence, yeah.
And good dialogue will just continually have a steady beat or rhythm to it, pulling you from sentence to sentence, scene to scene, exchange to exchange, dramatic pauses, people screaming at each other, how fast the dialogue goes, how slow it moves. And music used to be a great thing to study, but I would say right now, so much music is so formulaic and empty that it's not really there anymore. Just as an example of someone who has a real rhythm to laying out bigger ideas, would say like maybe a Leonard Cohen or Bob Dylan's older stuff, or The Who. I mean, there a lot of songwriters were very good at this, and there's a reason so many writers paid attention to musicians and singers and how they crafted their lyrics, because you could apply similar rhythms to your dialogue. And that doesn't mean it rhymes or that it has a verse chorus structure, but that the words themselves fit together in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I would say one of my great big fallbacks is the band ChemLab, and that the singer Jared Lucci is an incredible visual poet. It's just the things that the imagery he'll mesh together and the way that he'll tie them together in his songs has an almost Chandler-esque noir feel, or Gibson-esque, William Gibson-esque cyberpunk feel to it. And it is worth looking at. I mean, something as simple as I look out across a constellation of bars in the night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that would be one way of studying. And I'm not sure if I really communicated that too well.
Chris Fine has a great question. What is your take on dialogue tags? I suck, said Carol, versus I suck, Carol growled through gritted teeth.
Don't worry. I'm a really good writer, and I hate them. They drive me nuts. I stress over them. And it's the thing that I probably write and rewrite and nix and pull out and put back in the most.
Yeah.
They're a real pain in the ass.
Look at that example, for example. So yeah, I mean, see, dialogue tags, I mean, yeah, as much as possible, almost always, I just like to stick with said Carol or asked Carol. That's about my only deviation I'll try there. Because look how much more powerful it is. So I suck, Carol growled through gritted teeth. You could say I suck, Carol said, and then you could describe that what she's doing with her teeth. I suck, Carol said. I'm blanking on it now, but her
ground
actually
audibly.
I don't even like, whenever possible, I try not to include the dialogue tag. I suck.
Good point. Yeah.
Carol clenched a fist, anger.
And a lot of people don't realize, but you do, and this sounds so rudimentary, but a lot of writers I catch, and this is the way you avoid dialogue tags, is that you're supposed to indent every time you have a new speaker of dialogue.
Yeah.
And that's how that cues the reader that that's a new speaker, so you don't even need to say who's saying it, unless you have a bunch of people in the room or something,
There are a few times that you don't do that, but you really should.
Yeah.
just as a rule, make it easy for the reader. But yeah, if you can not even include the dialogue tag, if the action in the scene gets it across already, don't bother. Although there is a wonderful rhythm to I'm leaving, John said. Go, she said. That's kind of a nice rhythm, just two in a row like that.
Yeah.
Or if you do have a back and forth dialogue, you can, after you establish the two people who are talking and the pattern, you can go 3 or 4, back and forths without putting a he said, she said. But you do, after about the 4th one, it's a good idea to throw in who's talking, because it can become confusing at times.
Yeah. Very true.
Okay, I think we're kind of grounding to a stop here. I mean, quickly in the chat. Does anyone else have a question?
Give them time there for the delay to catch up with them. But everybody's been saying they like the stream. Yeah, JK and Chris Fine, appreciate. And these streams stay up too, so you can share them. And when you're listening, if anybody's listening to these streams after it's gone up and this is the replay, and you have a question, you wish you were here or whatever, just DM either Ishi or Kat or myself or whatever, and they'll make their way back onto a show one day, because we try and do these every other week. So. Well,
I don't see any questions popping up, so I guess we can call it a night.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us.
Actually, I have questions, but now I feel on the spot. Yeah, so you can always ask them later. We'll always be back.
Okay.
What are your favorite examples of good dialogue? That's from Semantic Dragon.
That'd take a little bit of thought.
And that's aimed at you, Professor.
Oh, for me, yeah. Well, I was talking about those old movies. I was talking about screwball comedies in particular. Ishi brought up film noirs, how they're all great. Hard-boiled fiction. It's a lot of people think it's called hard-boiled because the detective's so hard-boiled, but no, it's actually because of the prose style. It's really stripped down, bare, and the dialogue is crisp and pops, and it's a good place to go. As Ishi was saying.
I would say my favorites as far as dialogue, you can't go wrong with Raymond Chandler.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it, a lot of his prose, just anything with Detective Marlowe, awesome. Philip Marlowe, anything he writes there. Also, the dialogue he wrote for Double Indemnity, awesome.
Oh, yeah,
amazing.
Great stuff.
Well worth studying.
Yeah.
And then on a completely different note, Hunter S. Thompson. I mean, it's because you read that, it's like, how does this even work?
Mm-hmm.
How does this even function as a story? But it does.
This is one thing that's it's current on my channel, because we're doing the book study through Something Wicked This Way Comes right now. But I've really liked Ray Bradbury's stuff, and I just want to read this one scene. And this is an interesting way to use dialogue, because it's Will, the little boy, listening to his parents talk through a wall. So he's only hearing certain things they say, missing some, but it's interesting. So his father's a lot older than he is, and he listens. Will imagine Dad sprawled, talking empty to an empty ceiling, on their bed, talking to his mother. Will makes me feel so old. A man should play baseball with his son. Not necessary, said the woman's voice, kindly. You're a good man in a bad season. Hell, I was 40 when he was born, and you, who's your daughter, people say. God, when you lie down, your thoughts turn to mush. Hell. Will thought his dad slept in the dark, a match being struck, a pipe was being smoked, the wind rattled the windows. Man with posters under his arm. Carnival, said his mother's voice. This late in the year? Will wanted to turn away, but couldn't. Most beautiful woman in the world, Dad's voice murmured. Mother laughed softly. You know I'm not. No, thought Will, that's from the handbill. Why doesn't Dad tell? Because, Will answered himself, something's going on. Oh, something is going on. I love that. So much is conveyed through the dialogue. Will's not even looking at his parents, but he himself in the story only has dialogue to go on. And he's inferring so much about what's going on without even seeing the other characters. That's really effective dialogue, I think.
Sorry, I haven't read P.G. Wodehouse. We suck.
I have, the Jeeves. That's funny. It's very British. I think the best version people might find visually is Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie doing that. It's good stuff. Yeah, good dialogue, but it's very, very, very British.
I think another one would be author Jeff Noon. His Vert and his book Nymphomation. Nothing off the top of my head, but he's got such a stylized way of writing. Well worth checking out.
Actually, I was just thinking about how much the novella The End of All Things has really stuck with me. British author talking about a love affair that ended horribly during, actually, I think it's World War II. But if I was to say any more, it would give it away. But the entire novella is written first-person perspective kind of a confessional, like he's talking to you, the reader. But there's very little actual dialogue. It's all through remembrances and like a stream of thought of memories. And it's so well done.
Sorry. Is there more?
No.
Mata Nui. Already kind of got an answer, but I wanna ask anyway. How do you write a character that's supposed to be annoying without ticking off the audience? Well, that's asked to you, Professor, first. So,
So he needs to be annoying, so he's going to have to annoy the reader to some degree, because the reader you want the reader to find them annoying too, but you don't want to continually shove them in the reader's face without them getting any sort of comeuppance. And the example I'll give to that, and I'm going to upset everybody in the chat now, because like, keep reading, it gets so much better. I know, and I am continuing to read, but I read the first Wheel of Time book. And Matrim is just a little piece of shit. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't help anybody. He's just there to be a freaking burden all the time. And there's no redemption for him whatsoever in that first book. I know it's a longer arc. I'm getting there. But I'm saying that was a case where I would say, yeah, I get it. The character's supposed to be annoying. But the problem is I'm rolling my eyes every time there's a scene with him. And that's too much.
Professor, you got farther than I did. I couldn't get past the first chapter.
Because of Matt?
I just, there's something about the writing of that particular book. I just couldn't get into it, and it grated on me. It's been years. Maybe I should revisit it, but I've tried to read that book 3 times, and every time I just can't do it. It's like reading Dragon Riders of Pern. I've tried several of Anne McCaffrey's books, and I just cannot get past like the first 2 chapters.
okay. Writing annoying characters. Well, it depends on the purpose of the annoying character. I mean, is the character there to be hated? Well, then sure, annoy the audience. And boy, they're going to enjoy it that much more when that guy gets punched in the face. Or, if you need that character to be annoying for that moment, that's fine. On the other hand, so many annoying characters are just fun to watch because you're watching them annoy other people. I mean, think of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Would you want to spend an hour in a room with that guy? No, but he's great watching him drive everyone else nuts.
Okay, that brings me to, I guess now we're kind of shifting subject matter, but for annoying characters, teenagers, because they're awkward, and also because it's part of their job being teenagers to be annoying little shits. I mean, that's just being a teenager. Even in the Harry Potter books, there are a couple of books in there where I was very impressed by how well J.K. Rowling wrote Harry as being a little shit, probably because she has boys of her own. Where is that line for the two of you when you're writing your characters, where you're writing a character that's supposed to be annoying, but you're writing that line of trying not to be so annoying the audience wants to put the book down?
Well, it really does. It does come to reader experience. I mean, this goes back to the thing Ishi said in the very first beginning of the episode tonight, that but it's so real, or this character, aren't they so annoying? Yeah, but I wanted them to be annoying. I can't tell you how many times I've told writers to give me manuscripts and I say, if you weren't paying me to edit this, I wouldn't keep reading because I don't enjoy spending time with these people. But you're not supposed to enjoy spending time with him. I want him to come. Well, good. Well, no one's going to do it, because why do you pay money and spend your quality time unless you've got any kind of redemption, unless it's somehow fun for the reader to be annoyed by this character? And that's the delicate balance, let them get their, let them experience some sanctions, give us somebody we enjoy being around as much time, or to relieve us of the annoying one or whatever, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I would say, be very conscious of your reader. Don't waste their time. Don't make it a chore to read your book.
Kat, maybe this would be a good way to wrap it up if she's wanting to wrap it up. But you've been asking us
I think we're about done here.
Yeah.
Well, you've been asking us questions. I was just curious, from an editor's perspective, are there any exercises or things like what would your last word on this kind of be as the editor, having to respond to a lot of these manuscripts or whatnot?
Oh, when I've gotten these manuscripts, well, okay, if I am reading for a client, like you said, I would talk to the client and ask them, where is this character coming from? Or with dialogue, if I think that it's way too lengthy, I will ask them, what are the important points? What is it exactly that you're trying to convey, establish? What is your end goal with this dialogue? And once I know that, I ask that so I can make sure that my read is accurate, that they at least were able to convey that and I was to figure it out on my own. Or if they're off base even on that. And then work with the writer to achieve the goal that they're looking for with their dialogue. Or if it's a character, like you said, are they supposed to be annoying? Do I want to kill them? Is that your point?
Yeah.
But I will say when I'm slush reading, it's too much dialogue, too much lengthy dialogue that seems to go nowhere and have no point. And especially authors that I think are trying to showcase how brilliant they are and achieving nothing, they immediately get dumped.
Mhm.
That is one of the things that I look for as a slush reader, is that type of writing, because that's not, I am not reading to see how awesome you are. I'm reading for the story. And if your point in writing is to show off how awesome you are, you get dumped.
Well done.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't,
no.
I was gonna say, if you don't mind, once you guys, finish out, go ahead and sign off. I want to stay on just for about 10 more minutes and just show some campaigns. I just want to direct some people to some campaigns that are ending soon and stuff like that. So I'll be doing that. But yeah, go ahead and wrap up.
All right. Well, I would say thank you for joining us. Go to Amazon.com and buy some of my books, like World War Kaiju. How about that?
Giant monsters with tons of dialogue. In fact, I would say 3/4 of the book is dialogue. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
All right, so I will be off of here in just a little bit, guys. But I wanted to show you some campaigns here that are ending somewhat soon, and one of them is by our good friend Mike Murphy here. So let me share the screen. So I've been talking about this a lot to people, to my usual viewers, but I know some people come to this stream who don't necessarily show up on others. You come for different content or whatever. But let me share this here. This is Mike Murphy. He has been on my channel many times, and he is the writer of Samurai and Dinosaurs, which was all kinds of successful, and Kelsey Shannon doing that wonderful cover for it, and a lot of people involved. And this is a cyberpunk / post-apocalyptic book. Let me get down to the colors, because the colors are really great. He's got a great artist. I love the idea, and the reason why I wanted to show this book and the other ones that I'm going to show here tonight, just 2 or 3 more, is that I love the fact that crowdfunding comics now, we have such a broad array of genre fiction, because for a while there it was pretty much horror, and that was just about it. And I'm doing what could be called a horror book too, with Tales from the Stacks. But I love this kind of cyberpunk idea. Ishii's books are great with the noir takes on that. But the art looks wonderful. Some of the stretch goals. Perks include art from Ethan Van Sciver, Carlo Rowe, who was on our channel the other day for Deathsworn, which is really great. So it's a great book, but it needs, if you're thinking about it, backing it, if you think it at all be interesting, you got to jump on it. It's got 8 days left, but it still needs to meet its goal. So we still need some work there. I'm in talks with Mike now. Maybe he'll come on my channel tomorrow or something like that. But that's one thing I wanted to share with some people. And there's another one here. Let me just roll through. Open the tab. This one is somebody else that's been on. Where'd it go? Do I have it here? Sorry. Hang on, give the boomer a moment here. Okay. Nope, that's not it. What did I just do? I hate it when it does that. What am I doing? I'm sharing my Facebook. Why am I sharing my Facebook? Sometimes you click the Chrome thing to share and it won't it jumps. Like you click on the URL you want to share and all of a sudden it jumps up. I hate it when it does that. All right. Now, there we go. Got it. A Ballad of Dusty Tortillas. I've had Brandon and Stephen Kemp on my channel a lot. This campaign, they've actually made more than that. They started it with a different campaign with a different artist, but that artist pulled out. So they're still doing it. And they're still honoring that old campaign, but they went ahead and started a new one with the new artist here. And this is good stuff. Let me just find the tab there and scroll through it. But this is because I just showed you a cyberpunk one. Now we've got a Western one. And that's just really great stuff. Look at this art. I've backed where I can get the and this is just straight up Western. It's not like Western sci-fi, Western, it's just straight up Western adventure. And I love that, because that's enough, it's really great. I definitely made sure I got some of the prints. I love this, forget her name, her character's name. She's like the madam of the brothel, I think, or whatever, but she's a badass. So really great. The Ballad of Dusty Tortillas. Make sure you see this picture when you look for it on Indiegogo, because there's and I'll drop these links in the chat here in a second too. So let me put the link just in case anybody's interested. This is the link toward to the Gods Fear Me that I just showed. Make sure that's away, and then I'll put the link here to the Ballad of Dusty Tortillas, and then I'll show this last one that I want to show. Well, actually, I want to show a last one, and then I want to show mine. But anyway, the last one that's not mine, I'll show here is our good friend Art T. Bear. Art T. Bear, of course, the legendary writer, comic. Here he is. Art's in here. Yikes. I don't feel like I'm the only boomer out there. Yeah, I when it comes to technology, I'm a Gen Xer, but when it comes to technology, I am a total boomer. Maybe not quite as much of a boomer as you are, Art, but still pretty good. But yeah, Art's book here. It's where's the, make sure I've got the right tab now. The Chrono Mechanics. This is a campaign that's coming soon. So, Indiegogo's doing these coming soon pages now, and I'm going to have my own up here pretty soon. But it looks like an incredibly fun book, and he's just added some perks. So if you sign up, all this is, there's nothing to buy yet. All you do is just go here. I'll put the link in the chat. Art, I don't know if I've given you a wrench yet, but feel free to drop your link as well if you want. There we go. There's the link to Art T. Bear's Chrono Mechanics. And all you do is just sign up. You just put your email address in there, and then you will be set. So if that's not, it doesn't mean you absolutely have to back the campaign or buy anything at any point, but it just means that you will get notified via email when the campaign's live, and you'll have a chance at some of these extra perks. Looks like a lot of fun. Again, a completely different type of story, really broadening the spectrum for the comics we can get on this crowdfunding. And I just love that. So looks like a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to, I think my nieces will like this too, reading it with me. It's always fun to grab something like that. It's a cool concept. I think it was a cartoon he was saying that he pitched for a time. So definitely check that out. Now, all right, there we go. I am going to reveal now, because my own next campaign will be launching next month once I get these books started to ship out for the Tales from the Stacks. But I want to launch a pre-campaign here very soon, and I'm just going to share with you all the cover, the official cover here for The Fall of Mithrisis. This is the Sword and Sorcery comic book that I'm doing next. This will be my next campaign. And we've got the Aspirational Comics logo there that Ishii did up for me. This is Pablo Romero art. Pablo Romero is the interior artist and colorist for this book. So this is a straight up story. It's an issue 1 of or a part 1 of this longer story. And I'm gonna put put parts of the story out maybe twice a year. That's the goal right now, so people don't have to wait too long. But it's a really fun sword and sorcery story. I like it a lot. It's a novel that I worked with for a long time, and I've decided that it's very conducive to visual storytelling. So putting it over there to that one. So sweet. I love Pablo Ramirez's art. It's just great. I wanted it to have that style of some of the classic Conan or Red Sonja comics, from the 80s or 70s even. So I love his style of art where he can really, matte down the colors and make it look like that. So definitely check that out. I will have, Tales from the Stacks is still available for very, very soon. Definitely keep, back that, if you will. But the pre-campaign page will be coming from this book within the next few days, hopefully. So I'll be announcing that and showing people where they can sign up for that. So that's all I got. Yeah, feeling a Roy Thomas vibe. Cool. I think it looks good. Thanks, Art. Yeah, Big Al's been. I'll send Al a cover design because I love the art when I got it. And then Ishii did a lot of work on the cover. Ishii did the logos there. I love those. And Ishii was putting it together. But just every time it would all come together, I would like it at first. And then I was like, maybe this one more thing. Or when I would finally like it, I'd send it to Al. And Al would be like, no, that's not good right there. So Al is pleased with this. Al has given his unconditional thumbs up on this part 1 of the Hollow Mithrisis, Josen's Journey. So we're good. We're golden. Keep an eye out. Semantic Dragon says, I feel like that girl should have kept her clothes on in anticipation of this attack. Well, her upper part of her clothing has just been torn from her, as you'll see in the story. So Christian Rodriguez says, what do you mean? I like them bare naked. So thanks for hanging out with us, guys, tonight. Good writing talk. We usually do this one every other week. The schedule's been crazy on this channel because of my birthday trip. And then we did this one last week. And I was going to do a Son of Comicsgate live again this week, but Kat is going to be out of town next week. The normal week we would do another writer's room. So we decided to bump it up to this week. And then next week I'll go back to the Son of Comicsgate live. So all that's going. I do not think I'll be on a needs more boobs here. How's this? Is that good? That work for you? I do not think I'll be doing a gaming stream later. I've got a lot of stuff to get done. Having said that, though, if I just happen to really make some good progress and decide to jump on, you never can tell. But tomorrow I will be back for the members only gaming stream, which I place links on Twitter about that. Since YouTube has not okayed me for memberships, I'm just allowing people to. You can PayPal me $8 if you want. You get those gaming streams. Members only gaming streams where we do games like The Witcher and Conan Exiles and games that have more adult content that I don't really want to do on a public stream. So that'll be members only. And you also get the channel art, signed channel art print once a month as well. So trying that out, seeing what kind of interest is. We've got a handful of people now. So we'll do that for a time tomorrow night at some point. But yep, that's all I got for you folks. So thanks a lot for hanging out. Thanks for the happy belated birthday, Art. Yeah, still getting used to the 40. So it's going well. But yeah, it's been a blast. So thanks for hanging out tonight. And we'll be back for more tomorrow at some point, if not later tonight. Until then, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.